Hi friends! Welcome back to the Cripple Chronicles, the place where I talk about disability, mental health and somehow managing to keep a smile on our face when life throws one hell of a curveball. I'm Becca, your favourite one-legged host, mental health nurse turned patient turned advocate and self-proclaimed expert in finding humour in the messiest of situations. Today we are diving into something that I've been thinking about a lot lately, how we find faith and meaning when our bodies and lives feel totally out of control, especially with the recent rise in the belief that the rapture is coming. In my opinion, to feel in control of the unknown. I guess think of this episode as a mashup between a support group and a TED talk with a side of dark humour and maybe a couple of jokes about being an amputee thrown in there. This episode actually started because I have taken about a month break from recording. In that time, I have been navigating messy life situations that you will hear about soon. The euthanasia deep dive, which if you haven't seen it, check it out if you want some info dumping about a topic that has a lot of nuance and me trying to look at it from being in the middle. But I've also seen, I've still been online and taking notes and building out episodes, and just with what is going on around us, sometimes that feels scary because it's admitting to the shitstorm that's going on outside of my little bubble, which I guess is a privilege to be able to disconnect from news that causes me anxieties that others can't escape from as easily. And I also realised on YouTube Studio that YouTube's algorithm can suggest trending content ideas and how it links to the content you post. And in the 2 years that I've been posting, I've never really paid much attention to YouTube Studio outside of posting videos and replying to comments. And I was like, do you know what? I'll see what it suggests. And it was spitting out phrases like navigating recovery, faith in the unknown, spiritual anchors, searching for resilience and meaning in recovery. So if you have been following me along on my little journey, you know that spirituality played a huge role in me getting through having the Lazarus frame on, which is a big cage of wires and metals that held the bones in my leg together after my accident. And then spirituality popped up again with my amputation, believing that there was some kind of plan, even if that plan looked like an IKEA manual in different language with fucking pages missing. The belief that this was for a reason was the difference between hope and despair for me on some days. So if that sounds interesting to you, if that sounds like your cup of tea, grab some hydration, some snacks, and let's take a dive into, or a dip into, how spirituality, faith, and our communities can anchor us in during our recovery without tumbling into a world that looks like Alice in Wonderland, or I guess in recent terms, social media echo chambers. Could that be related to Alice in Wonderland? Probably. So let's get into it. I've got some energy drink, but I do also have some water. So yeah, let's go. What is spirituality and why does it matter? Before we get too far, let me just clear something up. Spirituality to me is not the same as organised religion, and the researchers at McLean Hospital explain that spirituality is a sense of connection to something larger than ourselves, a feeling of inner peace, purpose, and meaning that often exists outside of doctrine or theology. They point out that spirituality can involve religion, but it doesn't have to. It might show up as meditation, art, spending time in nature, service to others. People find peace in all kinds of areas of spirituality, and a lot of the time when I talk about my beliefs, I do often feel myself making the distinction between spiritual and religion, but I also don't have a strong feeling against religion unless it's like, I want to say serious, but that's not the word for it in terms of religion. Like when you get the die-hard Christians, like the people that try to shove religion down your throat. Not for me, but like you believe what you believe, and I have learned so much about different religions through people that I've met, and it gives me a far deeper understanding, and I can see how some of the things that they believe links into my beliefs. And yeah, I feel like spirituality and religion, in my opinion, like a lot of religions believe similar things, but they're connected to different people and stories. And I don't know, like, even just saying that feels like it sounds a bit disrespectful, but I guess it's just blunt. Maybe you can tell me what your opinions are in the comments. But why does it matter to me? Because as mental health researchers have shown, religious and spiritual practices are associated with better mental health outcomes, more optimism, higher levels of hope, and greater meaning and improved self-esteem. In fact, the World Health In fact, the World Health Organization lists spiritual health as one of the 4 pillars of well-being, and many people step away from organised religion because they find more peace in personal practices and community connections. There was a review found that 79% of studies on religious and spiritual practices and well-being reported positive outcomes. 73% found increases in hope and 81% found higher optimism. Spiritual practices like prayer, meditation, and communal rituals reduce stress hormones and improve emotional regulation. People who engage in community activities show a 20% improvement in coping abilities. And I guess here is where my personal story comes in. When my leg was encased in the Lazaroff frame and the pain was so intense, I was living in such survival mode, not just a day at a time, but sometimes minutes and seconds at a time, because I just desperately needed something to cling to. And like I mentioned, telling myself that everything happens for a reason was not just a positive affirmation to me. It was a life raft, one of those rings that somebody throws you in the pool when you're drowning. Without that belief, the despair and hopelessness I had, I feel like it could have literally swallowed me whole. I remember having a conversation maybe a year after the accident with the person who was with me when it happened, and I remember him asking me if I truly believed that it happened for a reason, and I remember telling him that I had to believe that, and if he didn't, I wasn't really sure how we could move forward, because I needed that for myself to keep moving forward, to believe that something better was coming, to believe that this was for something, it wasn't just for no reason, because if I started to believe that there was no reason for it happening, then I probably would have killed myself. Like, maybe at that time, my frame was my fucking religion. I'd pray to the metal pin gods that every infection would die down, and that I wouldn't whitey on the nurses when they were doing I wouldn't whitey on the nurses when they were doing wound care or removing staples or stitches. Faith, in whatever form, can be silly and sacred at the same time. Like, when me and Eleanor started our little daily affirmations, we used to use a Snoop Dogg video for it to feel less weird. And now, like, I just do it in front of people because it's a reminder to myself that good things are coming and I'm good. I'm doing a good job. Spirituality is good for us, but how does it actually work? Researchers studying caregivers during the COVID-19 pandemic found that higher levels of religious and spiritual practices were linked to lower psychological distress through more positive coping. In other words, this was not just belief alone, it was the coping skills that those beliefs encouraged. Participants used their faith to make meaning out of confusing, painful events and to try and cultivate hope that there was a better tomorrow. At times, on the hardest days, I would go to bed in tears and just hope that tomorrow was going to be better, even if that was just 1% better than the day that I had just survived. Positive religious coping helps people accept things that they cannot change whilst motivating them to act on what they can. That is exactly what I experienced in Al-Anon meetings. Al-Anon is not religious, it's for people affected by somebody else's alcoholism. Still, they talk about a higher power, something bigger than us. And they recite the Serenity Prayer. Grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. Each week I would read the words off of the screen and try to let them sink in. Al-Anon taught me that I cannot control a partner or a parent's drinking. And at first that was fucking terrifying. If I'm not in control, then who is? Over time, I began to realise that giving up control is not giving up responsibility. It is recognising the line between what is mine to carry and what belongs to someone else. That lesson became became very literal when my leg broke in front of me and had to be amputated. I had zero control over my bones healing with a frame on. I didn't know how far up my leg they would have to amputate, and I had said when considering amputation that I really wished that this did not have to be my decision because it just felt so heavy. But at the same time, that loss of control was just as terrifying. My friends could pray and light candles and send me good vibes, but none of us had a magic wand to fix what was broken. Accepting that allowed me to focus on what I could do, following rehab plans, advocating for my care, my autonomy, figuring out what my life looks like. And since The beginning, finding humour in the chronicles that keep unfolding. Trusting a higher power and trusting myself are not mutually exclusive. They reinforce each other and they create a pretty solid foundation for rebuilding myself. The dark side, when faith becomes psychosis. I do want to take just a bit of a moment in this episode to address something that I have definitely seen unfolding with TikTok and how easy it is for people's brains to believe things. And I do see a lot more people that are talking about the fact that this is religious psychosis. When you live with mental illness, and even if you don't know you live with mental illness, spirituality can be a double-edged sword. Medical news today explains that religious delusions, like believing you're a prophet or hearing voices from God, are common in psychotic disorders. Signs include paranoia, excessive rituals, grandiose beliefs, and intense guilt. Without treatment, these delusions can harm you and the people around you. A summary from A Mission for Michael notes that religious psychosis often presents with hallucinations, disorganised thinking, and behavioural changes. And it can stem from genetic, psychological, and cultural factors. Treatments for spiritual psychosis can involve medication, therapy, and support from trusted people. So how do we stay grounded in a world where access to information and potentially other people's delusions is so easy? First, recognise that questioning your beliefs is healthy. If faith makes you frightened, paranoid, or obsessed with the fear of punishment, that's a big red flag. Positive spiritual practices should bring peace and connection, not fear and anxiety or paranoia. Secondly, please talk to someone. A therapist or a trusted friend can help you to untangle whether a belief is inspiring hope or fueling a delusion. If you keep it in your head or doom scroll into the depths, it can really begin to grow arms and legs, and then it totally gets away from you. Third, remember that spirituality does not excuse bad behaviour or absolve us of responsibility. In my own journey, I have seen how easy it is to slip from "this happened for a reason" to "I'm a helpless victim." Victimhood can breed in higher power mindsets if you use spirituality to avoid accountability. Overall, faith should empower, not disempower. So, what are some practical ways to cultivate some spiritual anchors? How do you integrate spirituality into daily life without feeling like a complete weirdo? Research at Rogers Behavioural Health suggests starting where you are and living your values. That could mean mindfulness and meditation, spending a few minutes each day noticing your breath or appreciating nature. God, I'm so windy today. Mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress. Mindfulness has been shown to reduce stress and improve emotional regulation. I am someone who struggles with typical mindfulness or guided meditation where you shut your eyes and you visualise a forest or a beach or something like that. I don't have is it a third eye? In my head, when I shut my eyes, it is black. I can see shapes sometimes. If I really focus, I can see kind of fuzzy things, but most of the time when I close my eyes and I can actually see something, I'm asleep and dreaming. So it is difficult for me to do like that kind of typical guided meditation, and I kind of always related that to mindfulness. So if you are someone like me, what I tend to do is I will disconnect from socials, maybe put my phone away in a drawer, put on airplane mode, whatever, go for a little stroll in nature. I am somebody who goes out sometimes and I'll wear headphones because I think growing up in a traumatic environment, I feel uncomfortable at a lot of times when there's just silence. Like, silence to me used to feel like danger, and I've definitely got a lot better. Like, I find myself in the house not having music or the TV on as much in the background, but something that I had to start kind of doing is like when I go out and, for example, I go in my wheelchair and I'm going down the psychopath, it is really nice nature wise. There's like some greenery, but then you're going by next to the river, and it's for me like having that comfort of music, like taking my headphones off and actually looking around me, listening to the birds or the movement of the water or somebody cycling by and ringing their bell, like just being present in the moment, not using things that are necessarily creating distractions and taking me away from the full experience of where I am, because it is really easy for me to spend nearly a week in the house and realise that I just need to get outside for a little bit. I also find box breathing really helpful to bring my stress down and kind of go from like threat mode to like bit safer nervous system calmer mode. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, box breathing is when you breathe in for 4, you hold for 4, you breathe out for 4, and then you hold for 4, and then you repeat that. And I usually like maybe 2-3 minutes if it's a day where I'm feeling really anxious, maybe 5 minutes, and I just do it until I can start to feel my nervous system calming down. I'm not in fight or flight, I'm safe. And like sometimes incorporating affirmations like that into it is really important. I know that I have some videos and stuff like that that I recorded when I had the frame on, when I'm fucking bawling and having such a bad day and the suicidal ideation is high, but I'm then telling myself it's going to be better, I'm loved, I'm safe, I've got this. And even if I didn't believe it, it was better to tell myself those things than repeat what was going through my head, because I spent my life before my accident repeating all of the negative things in my head to myself, and it just made me hate myself. So I was trying to do something different because clearly what I'd been doing for years hadn't been working. Anyway, let's get back on to what like cultivating spiritual anchors, things that you can do in real life to help you build spiritual things and, I don't know, help like your recovery and your coping skills and all of the good things that I've mentioned. Other thing is creative expression. Art, writing, or music can be deeply spiritual. When I was stuck at home with wires in my leg, I turned to writing and digital art. Drawing out random things causing me pain helped to remind me that I was more than a patient or a burden, and it was an outlet as well. I remember one day, like, one of the drawings that I had done that a friend ended up getting tattooed was of a razor blade and roses. Wow, voice crack. It was of a razor blade and roses because I really wanted to self-harm, but instead of self-harming, I took my iPad out and I started drawing, and then my friend got it tattooed on them, and like, that is such a crazy thing to happen from something that I was doing to cope in that moment. Something else that might help is community service. Volunteering helps to connect us to something larger than ourselves and build resilience. Helping others can also lift our mood and offer different perspectives. Like I'd mentioned, finding time in nature, there have actually been studies that have found that times in green spaces decrease stress and increase feelings of connection. Rituals and prayers. If prayer resonates with you, incorporate short prayers or affirmations into your day, even lighting a candle and taking a moment to set an intention for the day or the next day, or kind of some gratitude for the day. It can be pretty grounding. I think the most important thing is that these practices are flexible. You don't need to go all the way up top of a mountaintop or find a waterfall to meditate at, or even spend hours in the church. As a disabled woman with an above-knee prosthetic, I don't always have the energy for long spiritual endeavours, should I say. Sometimes spirituality for me looks like laughing with my friends whilst they clean my wheelchair in the rain, or letting myself ugly cry with gratitude when somebody lights a candle for me at the chapel. Like I said, I might not be a fan of organised religion, but people who put their faith in the church and say prayers and light candles, or do anything with their faith that in a way is to support me, really hits a spot in my heart, because I think that shows love and care. And it does kind of link back to what I'd mentioned in the introduction, like a loss of control and trying to find meaning when there are things like surgeries happening, legs breaking, amputation, these, like, even infections and stuff like that. The person that is saying the prayer or lighting the candle doesn't feel like they can do anything else, so they turn to their faith and their higher power. And like, I do think that shows love and care for someone. I don't really know how else to put it like that. I feel like I've actually just rambled on for like 2 minutes talking about religion and lighting candles, and how, like, you can be spiritual and not part of an organised religion, but also still feel the care and the love and the things like that from people that do put their faith in organised religion, because that's what helps them. Like, just because, what's the saying, I'm not going to yuck somebody else's yum. I feel like that's usually talking about like sexy things or whatever, but like, goes there. Let's have a little chat about blurring lines between faith and personal responsibility, because I mentioned earlier about using religion or faith to avoid accountability. One of the tricky things about faith is balancing surrender with agency. I'm gonna open another energy drink because my mouth's getting fucking dry, blood. Since I just did that accent and didn't even really mean to do it, that was more of a stim, I think. Chaotic in the middle of an episode about fucking spirituality and religion. And it's because I did that accent, but I'm like, if Simba could speak, I think he would sound like a pure, rough London geezer that owns a pub in EastEnders. Alright, mate, what the fuck are you wanting? I'm so bad at accents. Why did I do that? Am I going to cut this out? I don't know. If you see it, maybe you just cringed at me. I don't care. whilst I drink my 70p can of energy drink, okay? God, that was a lot more full than I expected it to be. Of course, as Becca, you just opened it. You'll be glad to know I'm actually nearly done this episode. Some spirituality advocates talk about letting go and letting God. This was something I heard in Al-Anon quite a few shares, and if I'm honest, it's a phrase that kind of makes my skin crawl because I feel like it implies giving up responsibility. My own recovery forced me to confront the line between acceptance and apathy. It's one thing to accept that you cannot control the past. It is another to give up responsibility for your future. Positive religious coping encourages both acceptance and action, not apathy. When I had my leg amputated, I allowed myself to grieve whilst still focusing on rehab and self-advocacy. And there was a balance there that kept me from drowning in despair or stuck in a cycle of toxic positivity. And from, like you've just seen with that little bit there, humour is something that has helped me a massive amount. If you've listened to previous episodes, you know that I just crack random jokes about being mentally ill or one-legged. I had an amputation celebration a few days before they chopped my leg off, like sitting in party hats and laughing with people who cared about me made all of the heaviness just feel that little bit lighter for those few hours. The first time that Eleanor came to see me, we were dyeing my hair and she came out of the bathroom, forgot about my leg and was so concerned and was like, "Oh my God, Becca!" And then she covered her mouth and burst out laughing. And I was like, Are you okay? Like, you sounded concerned. And she was like, "Oh, I was going to ask you where your leg was." And we laughed until we couldn't breathe and probably nearly pissed ourselves. But it's like moments like that where I realise that humour is part of my spiritual practice. I don't want to, never underestimate the healing power of a well-timed one-liner about disability or mental illness. There have been times where I have been crying and felt so much because my pain just hurts, because my heart just hurts. And there are one-liners that my friends say that will break me out of that, and I'll burst out laughing and then continue to cry. And yeah, at times that did make me feel absolutely fucking mental, but it is the realisation that, like, I've had times where I have been struggling so much. Like, I think it was maybe back in 2023, I'd spoke to Eleanor and I said, "Look, I'm feeling really suicidal. I don't know. I'm really struggling." And she said, "Right, okay, I'm going to come up." And I was like, "No, you don't need to do that. Like, I'm not a danger to myself. I'm not going to do anything. That's just how I feel at the moment." And she was like, "Yeah, I get that, but like, you don't need to be on your own whilst you feel like that." And there were periods of really deep conversations where we just spoke about how we're feeling, but then there were also moments where I could laugh and smile, and I guess still beliefs that I had in my head that if beliefs that aren't true, might I add, that if I'm able to smile and laugh and Eleanor's come up to support me, is she thinking that I'm faking it, that I'm not actually feeling suicidal, that I'm not actually mentally unwell, that this is... And for me, not a medical opinion, but I believe if somebody is struggling and questioning themselves, that when they're struggling and people are giving them support, that they're lying about struggling and being manipulative, that is usually a sign of someone not being mentally well. In my opinion, in my experience, for me. Maybe you get that too. However, that is going to be it for today. We have covered quite a bit in this little episode, the difference between spirituality and religion, how faith can support positive coping skills, the danger of religious psychosis, practical spiritual practices, and balancing surrender with responsibility. My hope is that you leave this episode feeling empowered to explore spirituality in a way that feels authentic and healthy for you. If faith has helped you to navigate your own recovery or you resonate with anything I said, you can let me know down below in the comments, or you could send me an email to cripplecchroniclespod@gmail.com because I would love to hear from you and hear your story. If you are someone who is struggling with spiritual delusions, please reach out to a loved one or a mental health professional. There is no shame in asking for help, especially if things feel overwhelming. If you enjoyed this episode, as always, please subscribe, like, do all of the good things, share it with a friend who might need a laugh and a bit of a spiritual pep talk. You can also find me on social media at Cripple Chronicles Pod. And again, shoot me an email if you feel like it. Your support keeps me coming back and doing all this research and posting my videos, and it makes my one-legged heart very happy. One-legged heart. If my heart had legs, would it have two legs? I don't know. Until next time, have faith in yourself. Anchor yourself to something bigger if it feels like something that helps you to cope, and remember that you're not alone. Even there's people around you, as well as a higher power if you believe so. Take care of yourselves and goodbye. Okay, listen first. Little boy, okay, bedtime.